Welcome back to another Millennial Mondays, your adult book recommendations for this week. So if you haven't joined us before, this is Millennial Mondays with me, Mercedes, and we're going to do some adult book recommendations today that will bring you joy. And this Millennial Monday, I want to give you guys some fast reads that you guys can do while still enjoying the holidays with your family at home. So I want you guys to shout out into the void what you are thankful for this holiday season. Y'all, I'm a little excited. Why, may you ask? Because the Bridgertons are coming to Netflix, y'all! And I shouted with glee. If you have not read The Bridgertons, it's an 8-book series by Julia Quinn, who is a romance author. The very first book was published in the year 2000, so yes, it is an older historical series, and remember that while you're reading them. The Bridgertons follows a family of 8 siblings. Each one of the books gives the siblings their chance to fall in love and make their way through the ton to find good matches. And Shonda Rhimes this Christmas is giving us an adaptation of that series by Julia Quinn. But I don't want to talk about the Bridgerton series, because honestly, I would ruin who Lady Whistledown is in like the first 5 minutes of me talking about this series, and nobody wants that. And also, I'm not a huge fan of the first book. I am all about book number 3 in Benedict. I am a Benedict Bridgerton fan, so yeah. So instead, I am going to recommend to you a nonfiction adult book that I really, really love. So I want to recommend to you today Mad and Bad, Real Heroines of the Regency by B. Koch. And B. Koch is actually one of the founders of the first romance bookstore in America called The Ripped Bodice. And she runs it with her sister, and it is out in LA. The second bookstore, romance bookstore that after them was Love Sweet's Arrow, which is in Chicago. But B, she runs this store with her sister, and one of the cool things that they do on their website every single year is they have a diversity report they put out. So they look at all the books that are published in the romance publishing world, and they see how many of those books were written by women of color. It's really interesting. This is a fantastic nonfiction book that is about the Regency era. A lot of people think that women during this time were quiet and meek and matronly, and that really just isn't the truth. The women during this period had political power. They were artists. They were women who were doing amazing things, yet we don't really hear their names in our history books. They were writers and artists, troublemakers, women who did not fit the typical stereotype of what a good matronly woman was supposed to be at that time. So this book goes into different chapters that looks at different subsections of women during this time. Like Mary Seacole, who was a Jamaican Scottish woman of color who wrote the very first autobiography published by a Black woman in England at that time. She was a nurse during the war, and she was pretty famous, like maybe even as famous as Florence Nightingale. We also learn about Carolyn Herschel, who was the first person to discover a comet. Women were more than mothers during the Regency era, and B gives us an account of all these different women, these women who were political powerhouses, women who were scientists, mathematicians, women who did not fit the status quo of what a good woman was supposed to be during the Regency era. And I really, really like this nonfiction account that B gives us. It is a quick read. She gives you just enough information to make you curious, maybe to read more about that person. And it is a fast, interesting look at women during the Regency era. I don't know about you, but I was raised on a steady diet of creature features and B horror movies growing up. I remember watching The Blob with Steve McQueen and tons of episodes of MST3K when I was growing up. So I have a healthy love of monsters, and the next book that I want to talk about is De-Evolution by Max Brooks. This is a horror story that does not take itself too seriously, but it also does give you some thrills and chills as well as you are reading it. Max Brooks is the author of World War Z, if you have read that book or seen the movie, and he gives us an account, a first-hand account of a Bigfoot massacre of a small environmentalist town called Green Loop. It is told in first-hand journal accounts by Kate Holland, and then also interviews with people who looked at the massacre afterwards. So interviews with the forest rangers and stuff who came onto the scene afterwards. And it is told in all first-hand accounts. It's really, really interesting. Green Loop is an environmentalist colony. So Mount Rainier explodes, big bada boom, and Bigfoot is real, and there's an entire family of Bigfoot, big feet, and they are driven off of their lands because of the volcano exploding, and they come upon Green Loop. And Green Loop is this environmentalist, experimental colony of people who are living together off the grid. So their houses have solar powering energy, they do recycled water, all their food is delivered via drone. So they are really, really off the beaten path. It is this get back to nature, healthy eating, healthy living style kind of life that they are trying to live. And Kate Holland has just moved to a house in this colony, and she is writing journal entries about her time here. And spoiler alert, Bigfoot is real, and Bigfoot is not afraid of environmentalists living in the woods. This book is fantastic. It is over the top. It is a campy. It is a horror story. It is a survivalist story. And it's just really a fun read for sure. For anybody who's maybe into monster books or survivalist books, I definitely recommend Max Brooks' De-Evolution. And I enjoyed it so much that I read it in one sitting. And I am going to give it a 5 out of 5 stars. This is your heart on a Colleen Hoover novel. Would you like to read a story this Thanksgiving season about a family more messed up than yours? Would you like to have your heart torn out of your chest and destroyed? Would you like to have an existential crisis where you call your mom for 2 hours and cry about how awful you are as a daughter and how much you love her? Colleen Hoover may be for you. In grad school, while my brain was being torn apart by theoretical blah, 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 I found Colleen Hoover, and it was the saving grace I needed at that time in my life. It was a book that put me from theory back into my body. She is categorized as a romance author, but I really just think of her as one of the great writers living today who writes books that tear your heart apart. Pre-pandemic, in January, Colleen Hoover came to a Joseph Beth near me, and I stood in line for hours making sure that I got my books signed by her. It is one of the last memories I have of the outside world, and it's a really great memory because I remember the hundreds and hundreds of women that were there that were standing in line waiting to get their books signed by Colleen Hoover, and how joyous it felt that we were all there at the same time together. Her novel being released at that time in January was Regretting You. And this story follows Morgan, who at 16 years old finds out that she is pregnant. She decides to keep her baby, and she also decides to marry the father of her child. Her dreams kind of go out the window because of that, but she wants this family. She wants this child. And then the story picks up 16 years later when her daughter Clara is also 16. Her daughter Clara wants her own life. She kind of doesn't really want anything to do with her mom, and she wants to spread her wings and be her own person. Morgan finds out a secret that her husband has been keeping that threatens to tear her entire family apart. And it especially threatens to tear apart the relationship that she has with her daughter Clara. Morgan loves her daughter, but she doesn't know how to have this conversation about their family with her daughter Clara. So, this is a book that is very emotional. It is a book about mother daughter relationships and what that looks like and how hard that can be sometimes, you know. And it is a book that is going to make you think about your own relationships with your family. And that is the only synopsis I want to give about this book because this is definitely an experience. Colleen Hoover's books always have twists in them. They are books that you cannot talk with someone about until they've read it too, because you don't want to spoil anything for the other person who is about to read the book. And I really, really love this book. I give this book 5 out of 5 stars. And if you are looking for emotional women's fiction, realistic fiction, family books, Colleen Hoover is a really great author to look into. She has a ton of books in her back catalog, but I really, really like Regretting You. And that is going to be it for another Millennial Monday. We are so glad that you could be here with us today. We hope to see you in 2 weeks when we do another Millennial Monday. Get ready for some more holiday reads, maybe. And so let's go ahead and dance party out of here.